Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Redmen TV and your latest edition of Expert Insight. My name is Dan Klopp. I will be your host as ever for this one. I'd like to say I'm joined by, once again, a familiar face to the channel and just generally in football terms, Sky Sports commentator Kevin Hatchard. Kevin, how you doing, mate? You okay?
I'm really good, Dan. Really good.
Good man, appreciate it. And yeah, obviously we often turn to you for any topic, to be honest with you, these days, but certainly when it comes to European expertise, and this is no different. Arne Slot, the man about to become Liverpool manager after Jurgen Klopp has left, of course, in the summer. Yeah, let's dive straight into it then. As I say, he looks almost certain to be the man to do so. I want to start off with, obviously, so much of the talk was about Xabi Alonso. We've spoken about Julian Nagelsmann. Ruben Amorim was a leading contender seemingly for a little while. And now we fall upon Arne Slot. Have you been surprised that it took this long to get to him? Or on the flip side of that, are you surprised that he has been named at all?
No, I'm not surprised that he's part of the process. And I think we said when we were talking about Xabi Alonso earlier that this was always going to be quite a forensic process. And, you know, Xabi Alonso is obviously somebody they were very interested in, but he made it clear that he wasn't going to be available and decided to stay at Bayer Leverkusen. And I think when we talked about it, we hoped that it was going to be a forensic process, because what you want is somebody who ticks as many of the boxes as possible. You don't just want, oh, well, he's done well, let's go for him at the exclusion of everyone else. And, you know, even up until very, very recently, they were thinking about a number of candidates. I've been told that Julian Nagelsmann was at least on the list at one stage, and obviously he decided to stay with Germany. And so you look at Arne Slot, and when you consider his recent career, when you consider the way he works, he does tick a lot of those boxes in the sense that he plays aggressively without the ball. He plays a very attacking style of football. He's somebody who I think does have the charisma to deal with a big job like this. And I think something that will really have appealed to FSG and Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes, I think, is he's somebody, if you look at Feyenoord, he's somebody who's learned to deal with people from all different levels of the club. So he's very collegiate in the way that he works. And I think an organisation like Liverpool, if you look at the way they run, it was never going to be an all-powerful manager to come in and replace Jurgen Klopp. And obviously, as Klopp has been there longer and longer and longer, by nature, he's going to accrue more and more influence, have more and more say in various things. Don't think Liverpool actually wanted that this time around. That's not a dig at Jurgen Klopp. I mean, that's the case with any manager who's in a job for a long, long time. It'd be the case with Guardiola at Manchester City, certainly the case with guys like Ferguson and Wenger at their respective clubs. The longer you're at somewhere, the more you become that kind of all-powerful force. And I think maybe Liverpool didn't necessarily want that this time around.
No, I think you're right. And this does feel like sort of going back to our roots in many senses, certainly with Michael Edwards in situ, obviously Richard Hughes thereafter. And this appointment, do you think Arne Slot will be sort of part of that team to work in tandem? And like you say, that Jurgen Klopp earned the power that he ended up having at Liverpool. There's no two ways about that, because his success was incredible. But do you think this now is FSG going back to what worked initially, what got us to where we were?
Yeah, I think they certainly want somebody who's going to be part of the process. You want somebody who's a big character. You want somebody who's capable of being decisive, and Arne Slot's absolutely that. But you also want somebody who's willing to listen and willing to work with the medical department, with the scouting department, with the recruitment department. You want somebody who's going to take all those ideas on board, stand up for their own ideas, of course, as well. But it's not a my way or the highway approach. Certainly that's not the way he's worked at Feyenoord. He has very clear ideas of what he wants, and the club have, made allowances for that. But equally, there's the example of Santiago Jimenez, who's the Mexican striker, who's done so well for Feyenoord in the last couple of seasons. Slot was told not to start him too much to start with because they wanted to work a little bit on his biomechanics. They wanted to slightly change the way he ran. They wanted to slightly change the way he approached things. So they didn't want to overload him in the early part of the season. And so Slot took that on board and said, okay, I won't start him relentlessly. He was a sub for a while and then he earned that regular first team place. So I think he's somebody that has those principles, but is willing to listen as well.
Okay, that's interesting. I feel like it fits quite nicely actually into the FSG model and the way they go about it, that working in unison and the harmony of it all. That's impressive. Just on him more generally then, quite an impressive CV really so far up until this point in his career. Obviously, AZ Alkmaar, they were on course for all intents and purposes to potentially lift the Eredivisie before that season came to an abrupt end. I mean, it is pretty good work what he's done up until now.
Yeah, it is really impressive. As you say, at RZ, he'd done a brilliant job, really, in the sense that he took over and I think they would have been champions, actually, if you look at their results against the big hitters in the Eredivisie that season before COVID struck. I think there was a very good chance of them winning the title, which would have been an enormous achievement. Mm-hmm. You look at the way he's turned things around at Feyenoord, which was a club that had a big name, but was lagging behind Ajax and PSV, no doubt about that. And he's managed to get them to the top of Dutch football. And really, they've only been denied this season by an incredible season from PSV under Peter Bos. So, you have to put that in context as well. They've won the cup. They've had some good European runs. I think it's always really interesting when you have a managerial search like this, what fans will get excited about and what they won't. So some fans might have had an idea of Ruben Amorim, for example, and thought, right, he's an exciting guy, we want to go for him. Well, all of the things you would get excited about Amorim, you get excited about Arne Slot, because there's a guy who's taken over a club that hadn't won the title for a while, has won the title, has had some good runs in Europe, plays, an exciting style, and somebody who not only is punched above their weight, but is able to develop players as well. And so all of the things that made Ruben Amorim an interesting candidate are the things that should make Arne Slot an interesting candidate as well. And I also think same reservations are true of both as well, because making the leap from the Premier League, for me, is similar to making the leap from the Eredivisie. There are a clutch of strong clubs at the top and a clutch of clubs that maybe aren't strong elsewhere. And so it is a leap. But every managerial appointment is going to be a leap, is going to be a risk. And so I think for what Liverpool want, and for the kind of style that Liverpool have been playing, for the kind of players they already have, I think he is an exciting appointment potentially.
Okay, that's really interesting. And that takes us nicely on to the next question, actually, because I'm going to ask you sort of stylistically, because I spoke to Mark Carey a month or so ago now from The Athletic, and just as almost a throwaway line, he mentioned Arne Slot as being somebody who ranked very highly compared to Jurgen Klopp's style and the way his teams play. And I do wonder whether they've looked at that clearly, because we know it's a data-driven approach that they obviously have. But it feels as though obviously Pep Lijnders was never in line to get the job because he said immediately. So this is almost a little bit of continuity stylistically, it feels like, because we mentioned Ruben Amorim, like in terms of the formation, his preferred was a 3-4-3, so it's different. Whereas with Arne Slot, we might be getting not Klopp 2.0, but it's more similar, would you say?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair to say. He's played a lot of 4-2-3-1, but he's played a lot of 4-3-3 as well. It's not going to be anything that's completely out of whack with what Liverpool have been doing. And I think that certainly, you look at some of the players that he has at his disposal, I think he could certainly work with them. I'd be excited if I was Conor Bradley, for example, because there's a young guy that I think he could develop really, really well. I think Quance is another one. I think the young guys at Liverpool, Harvey Elliott's another one, I think, guys who have already got a bit of experience under their belts but have that potential. There's no reason why Arne Slot can't come in and continue the really good work that Jurgen Klopp's done with those guys already. So I think that's an exciting strand. In terms of what Liverpool fans expect, having watched Klopp's football for a long, long time, they're not reactive Slot's teams. They want to go and win the ball really high up the pitch. And we've seen that in terms of those high regains, as the data guys say. They want to win the ball high up the pitch. I mean, Feyenoord are right up there with Liverpool in terms of the volume of those high regains. but they're not slavish to it. If it's not there to be won, then they will drop back into a defensive shape, and they will be, a little bit more patient. It's not pressing for pressing's sake. It'd be interesting to see how he adapts it to the Premier League and how he adapts it in the Champions League as well. So I think that fits. He wants to score goals. He wants to attack. He doesn't, it's not about results above everything. He has that kind of Dutch philosophy about him, if you like. I think another point that's really interesting, and I think in the social media age, this is always going to happen, right? He's bald and he's Dutch. So what are people going to say? They're going to start talking about Erik ten Hag. There are two strands to that, I think. I think the first one is Erik ten Hag is a good coach. Erik ten Hag is not at a settled football club. He's at a club that is still going through enormous change with a group of players that has been hit and miss. And I think has had a lot of challenges. Now, that's not to defend Ten Hag. That's not to say, he's been amazing. He clearly hasn't, especially in the second season. But I don't think you can look at what's happened under him at United and suddenly go, wow, Slot's going to be no good either. It doesn't make any sense. He's coming into a very different setup. He's coming into a more settled setup, I would say. Even though obviously, they've had big change with Richard Hughes going in and Michael Edwards coming back. Certainly with Edwards, he knows how the club works. He knows how FSG works. So, it feels like that they'll hit the ground running. So I'm not worried about that. And I think the other thing as well is that, there are reservations about the Eredivisie. There's no doubt about it. And that's not a knock against that. It's just you leap up a quality level, there's no guarantees. But his English is excellent. He's a very good man manager. You listen to players who played for him, work with him, they'll almost uniformly tell you that he improves players, that he gets the best out of players. And I think he's the kind of guy that could, do the politics of a big club like Liverpool. Not that it's the same as somewhere like Bayern or PSG or something like that, but you still need to have that ambassadorial ability like Jurgen Klopp absolutely has. I think he can do that. So, yeah, I think it's potentially very exciting. I think there are a number of avenues that could have gone down, and I think this is one of the really positive ones.